During the Second Age, the men of the mountains swore an oath to Isildur, the founder and king of Gondor, that they would fight for him. But in secret, they worshipped the Dark Lord Sauron, and when the call for aid came, they refused. Betrayed, Isildur cursed them to never rest until your oath is fulfilled. Fearful of the wrath of Isildur, the men of the mountains fled, hiding in their homelands while waiting for the war to pass. But pass it never would, and slowly but surely their ranks dwindled and the sleepless dead began haunting. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries. The dead men of Dunharrow were left abandoned, doomed to a miserable fate. Their lamentations would only come to an end after Aragorn, the future king of Gondor, summoned them and called them to his aid. Hi friends, let me just be the one to say it. The monarchy is the best mechanic in Commander. It encourages active and aggressive play while being easy to understand and simple to track. Using it well is also one of the benefits of playing aggressive, low-to-the-ground creature decks, a style of deck that is unfortunately not as popular as I think it should be. Commander players love building up their engines, and I like smacking them in the face as they do so. So today, I want to introduce to you a commander that works well with the monarchy, but also with aggressive creature decks. Today, I want to introduce to you Aragorn, the King of Gondor. Aragorn is a 4-mana, 4/4 human noble in Jeskai colors. He has vigilance and lifelink, and when he enters, we become the monarch. While we are the monarch, at the end of our turn, we draw a card. However, our opponents can steal the monarchy by dealing combat damage to us. We can then of course also reclaim the monarchy again by dealing combat damage to them. Importantly, there's no way to get rid of the monarchy. Once it's introduced, it sticks around for the rest of the game. This means we only need to play Aragorn once to establish the monarchy, and from that point on we can use other creatures to fight for it. But that's not to say that Aragorn can't help, because when he attacks, up to one target creature can't block, meaning he can disable problematic creatures that might be protecting the current monarch. And if Aragorn attacks while we are the monarch, nothing can block, giving us complete reign over combat and an unmatched ability to push for damage. Aragorn is an incredibly easy to fit commander for any kind of creature-based deck, because he's helpful but not essential, since even if he's removed, the monarchy sticks around. This means, to build a deck around the monarchy, we don't need to include a bunch of cards that reference it, since we only need to cast Aragorn once to guarantee it, and then we don't need to invoke it again. Instead, a deck centered around the monarchy should be of a certain style, one that plays enough creatures to defend and reclaim the monarchy to make sure that we are getting the card draw every turn, and one that limits our opponents from claiming it themselves. For those purposes, Aragorn's Vigilance and Lifelink are fantastic keywords to have, as they allow us to attack every single turn, keep a healthy life total, and maintain a defensive line. This all means that Aragorn works best in the kind of low-to-the-ground creature deck that we have set out to build. Next, we have to figure out the specifics of our deck, and of course we could just pick a bunch of generically good creatures and call it a day. But to me, that's not particularly interesting or fun. I think Commander is at its best when played with strongly thematic decks, ideally centered around both gameplay and flavor. A Lord of the Rings themed deck would be a solid choice here, throwing in some human kindred synergies and a few additional monarchy cards. But you don't need me to build that deck for you, that deck builds itself. So I set out to create something that's a bit more unique. In The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, there's this wonderful sequence where Aragorn summons the army of the dead to fight for him. I've always found this to be a very evocative image. A horde of terrifying ghosts crashing over the living. Just wonderful. To go into a slightly different direction for a moment, I also love how playful and colorful, but also still intimidating, Eastern interpretations of ghosts and spirits can be. So, for the theme of this deck, I thought we could combine these two ideas and reinterpret Aragorn and the Dead Men of Dunharrow as Aragorn and his army of delightful spirits. Spirits are an interesting creature type because they are not particularly popular but actually have a lot of support and unique mechanics. I think that's because they are just a very intuitive creature type to design. They were first introduced in 1996 and then accumulated various pieces of support and cards over the years. This also means their mechanics are a little bit all over the place, but we can just narrow them down to the pieces that make sense for our deck. Now, when building aggressive creature decks, we're looking for very specific things from our creatures. We want them to either draw cards, protect our board, or strengthen our other creatures. Card draw, protection, and buffs. Card draw is always the most important aspect of any deck like this. We only play very little ramp, since during the first few turns of the game, we want to already establish an aggressive board, and ramping would take too many cards out of our hand to do that effectively. Because of that, it's absolutely essential that we play a land on every single turn. Missing even a single land drop is a game-ending disadvantage. So, while we need card draw just to play creatures every turn, it's imperative for us to draw enough cards to get our lands. For this, we play, among others, Laelia, the Blade Reforged, Sturmgeist, and the delightful, mischievous Catgeist. Anything that will replace itself. Aragorn's Monarchy and Vanquisher's Banner are huge card draw assets as well. But by far the best option we have available is Coastal Piracy and other effects like it. Coastal Piracy is a 4-mana enchantment that lets us draw a card whenever one of our creatures deals combat damage to an opponent. Even with just a small board of 3 to 4 creatures, Coastal Piracy will let us draw 3 to 4 additional cards each turn, and that easily supplies us with the resources we need to maintain momentum. However, to effectively use Coastal Piracy, we need to actually have creatures that can hit our opponents. Aragorn does a great job at supporting this by disabling blockers, but we want to make sure that our primary strategy functions even if our commander is out of commission. When deciding on our creatures then, we should choose ones with inbuilt evasion. That way we can more easily apply pressure and draw cards. Luckily for us, a lot of spirits have flying, which is a great way to get past blockers and allows for additional synergies. So, we play Coastal Piracy and of course all of the Coastal Piracy clones, being Beidendorf-Fasa, Reconnaissance Mission, the Indomitable, and Enduring Curiosity. With these turning all of our flyers into adorable Catgeist, the occasional card draw from the spirits themselves, and the Monarchy from Aragorn, we have access to an endless stream of resources that will allow us to build and maintain momentum. We then want to start constructing a board. We don't need to go super wide with this right away. Just one creature a turn is plenty, so long as we ensure that our board sticks around. Since we don't play much ramp, we are at a huge disadvantage if we ever get hit by a board wipe and we have to start over from scratch. And since our board is going to quickly look intimidating, our opponents are likely to use their targeted removal on us as well. Luckily, there are a couple of spirits that do an excellent job at keeping our board alive. Selfless Spirit can be sacrificed to give all of our creatures indestructible. Drogskull Captain is a lord that also grants hexproof, which is crazy. And Guardian of Faith flashes in to phase out our creatures in response to a board wipe. Spectral Adversary functions similarly, although at a higher mana cost, but with the upside of being able to target problematic permanents our opponents might have. And Rattle Chains can only protect a single spirit, but lets us play spirits at instant speed, which means we can just flash them in after the time for sorcery speed removal has already passed. Finally, Millicent Restless Revenant and Ao the Dawn Sky don't strictly protect our board, but let us re-establish a board if it gets wiped. Millicent in particular is an incredible powerhouse card in this deck, as she comes down cheaply and then accelerates our board to an insane degree. On top of these defensive spirits, we also play a high quantity of counterspells. Luckily, we can find really flavorful ones if it comes to these. Malevolent Hermit isn't a spirit, but his backside, Benevolent Geist, is, and the front side is effectively a mana leak that can smack people. Similarly, Spell Queller and the Mausoleum Wanderer are counterspells attached to creatures, which is perfect for maintaining momentum. Mausoleum Wanderer in particular is a standout. It says that we can sacrifice it to counter an instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays X, where X is the Mausoleum Wanderer's power. Since we will buff the Mausoleum Wanderer with a variety of lord effects, this often presents an on-board counter to any large mana cost instants or sorceries, and that then stops our opponents from doing anything that might get countered for free. Of course, it's not actually free. Losing the Wanderer is a big deal to us, but from my experience, there's some powerful psychology at play here that makes it so that players aren't willing to run into a visible counterspell, even though long-term it would be the right call. Along the same lines, we also play Callow Yushi, which is one of those old flip creatures, but I've not managed to make it work just yet, so feel free to replace it. But I just think it's cute, and it also allows us to represent counterspells on the board. Aside from those, we also play a bunch of actual counterspells, like the classic Counterspell, but also really flavorful ones in Geistlight Snare, Phantom Interference, Lofty Denial, Dream Fracture, and Whirlwind Denial. If it comes to counterspells, just play whichever ones you like. There isn't really a correct answer here. I just picked these because they're good enough, and I like that they have a spiritly, ghostly flavor to them. Flavorful deck building doesn't have to be limited to just creatures. When using counterspells, make sure you aren't reckless. It's fine if our opponents throw down a big creature. As long as it doesn't kill us immediately, we can kill them first. Remember that blockers aren't much of a problem for us. We want to use our counterspells only for board wipes, pillow fort, or anything else that we are 100% sure we can't beat by fighting through it. For everything else, we just let our opponents play. Using too many counterspells too quickly will also draw a lot of negative attention, which is something we're trying to avoid. Since we're on the topic, this deck only plays 2 board wipes itself, and those are very specific. Harsh Mercy is a sorcery that lets each player choose a creature type and then destroys all creatures that aren't of a type chosen this way. To be honest, this barely counts as a board wipe, as it will usually leave large portions of the board intact, but it's cheap and doesn't affect our army at all, while sometimes clearing out significant sections of our opponents. However, it also comes up short when playing against other Kindred decks, so how usable it is depends on your local meta. A suitable replacement would be Earthquake, which is more likely to hit everything our opponents do, while still leaving most of our units unaffected. We also play Starfall Invocation, which will clear the board, but then we can reanimate something if we promise a card, which is a fairly small price to pay. Starfall Invocation is an emergency button in case we have no other options left, that will then also maintain a small bit of our board. On top of this, we also play a few targeted removal spells. Swords to Plowshares, Chaos Warp, Stroke of Midnight, Generous Gift, just the usual, and Skyclave Apparition. Skyclave Apparition is the only spirit I found that is actually proper removal. I don't know, we're a little limited there and we had to fall back to some of the generic options. I hope that's alright. The way I built this deck is by putting heavier emphasis on counterspells rather than removal, since counterspells allow us to prevent board wipes, and because of our high amount of card draw, we can usually find a 1 or 2 of the targeted removal spells each game, which tends to be enough. However, if you prefer having a larger set of targeted removal, then just replace a few counterspells, or a few of the indulgent cards I'll address later. We have now managed to build a board and defend it, while keeping our resources stocked. Now we have to kill our opponents, and the best way to do that is with Lords and Anthems. We don't want to just play big creatures that are threatening by themselves, because not only does that give our opponents easy targets for removal, but playing creatures that are too strong too quickly will also result in more aggressive counterplay from our opponents. We want to start with small utility creatures and then slowly but surely incrementally increase the power of our entire board into becoming game-ending. For that, it's plenty if we just play 1 Lord a turn and then keep mana open for interaction. Spirits actually have a surprising number of Lords. Some that are a bit weaker and situational, like Blood Age General, Empyrean Eagle, and the very fun Beckoning Will-O-Wisp. But then also a bunch of fantastic ones like Patrician Geist, Drogskull Reinforcements and Captain, Supreme Phantom, Balefire Liege, and Hoffrey Ghostforge. We supplement those with Force of Virtue, which is actually really easy to use in this deck because we're drawing so many cards anyways that the card disadvantage from casting it for free just isn't much of an issue. And then also the free banners: Banner of Kinship, Vanquisher's Banner, and Patchwork Banner. Each of these also brings in additional powerful benefits, with Banner of Kinship potentially being a game ender because it buffs based on the number of our creatures. So if we have a strong board, it can just kill our opponents on the spot. Vanquisher's Banner provides card draw, as we already discussed earlier, and Patchwork Banner is a tiny bit of ramp. As already mentioned, this deck doesn't really play ramp. Patchwork Banner is our only mana rock, and other than that, we only play Loyal Warhound, Claim Jumper, and Surveyor's Scope. The best catch-up ramp. There's a very high chance that in any given pot, somebody will somehow get an additional land in play, and then we can use these cards to match their tempo. I want to highlight Surveyor's Scope in particular, which is a 2-mana artifact that allows us to tap and exile it to search our library for a basic land for each opponent that controls at least 2 more lands than us. Surveyor's Scope is an absolute standout card in decks like ours because it only demands a minimal mana investment and then allows us to not only catch up to the table, but surpass it once an opportunity arises. Because we play bounce lands and aren't ramping ourselves, those opportunities aren't rare at all. The best part of Surveyor's Scope is that the lands it searches out enter untapped, and it can be activated on our opponent's turn. In other words, we can use it to catch somebody off guard with counterspells. At this point, we have card draw, we have protection, we have boss, which is all we need to maintain control over the game and quickly kill our opponents. We can also use the monarchy to encourage our opponents to hit each other by letting them take it from us so it can be passed around the table for some valuable chip damage before we easily reclaim it with our flyers. In addition to everything already discussed, we also play a small utility suite. Kami of Force Hope is a fog on a stick, Remorseful Cleric provides some easy to implement graveyard hate, and Mirror Hole Mimic lets us copy our best creature to create fully hexproof or double indestructible boards. One of my favorite cards is Storm of Souls, which is a wonderfully flavorful spell that reanimates every creature in our graveyard, but as a 1/1 spirit with flying. Since we play an abundance of lords, these 1/1 spirits are usually much more powerful than that. And if Hoffrey Ghostforge happens to be part of this army, then it can also immediately swing in with haste and threaten kills. Finally then, some indulgences. I think it's important that every deck plays some cards that might not be optimal, but are just cool and interesting. In this case, I've included Ao, the Dawn Sky, Kairi, the Swirling Sky, and Atsushi, the Blazing Sky. I just have this image in my head of Aragorn leading our vibrant army of the dead with these 3 beautiful dragons by his side, the generals to our commander. I just think it's cool. The dragons are fine cards. They're not amazing, but they're also not terrible by any means. Unfortunately, they are a bit expensive, which is why the budget of this deck is around 60 euros instead of the usual 50. Feel free to replace these with any other cards that you find to be more evocative. But if you could do me the favor, don't make it any changelings. I deliberately excluded them here as I don't like how they homogenize kindred-based deck building. Our land base is a simple 3-color budget selection. Please include whatever you already own to make it better. Just make sure to put emphasis on blue and white mana, as that's the vast majority of our deck. If you wanted to increase the power level and budget of this deck, then I would recommend adding a Moonshaker Cavalry to have a proper overrun, Kira Great Glass Spinner for a massive layer of additional protection, and Herald's Horn to get a bit of extra card draw and some cost reduction. A fun side effect of Aragorn being the leader of our deck, but not actually having any direct synergy with the spirits, is that he often goes ignored. He's not the target of our opponent's eye, so he tends to just stay on the board forever. So while I wouldn't usually recommend these because I think they're just generically good without much flavor, I do think that the likes of Fierce Guardianship, Flawless Maneuver and Deflecting Sword fit nicely into this deck because of Aragorn's tendency to stick to the board, and because it's him leading his army, and so it would make sense to me that he would be the one to go out of his way to protect it. Even Teferi's protection is flavorful here, since spirits are ethereal and phasing is represented on a few of their cards. And that's it. Play creatures quickly, establish the monarchy, and then maintain control over the game while building an overwhelming board. Have Aragorn lead a very unique army of the dead. I hope that this video can help act as guidance and inspiration on how to build similar decks. Recently I've been noticing a lot of conversations about how Commander deck building can feel very restrictive because you need a certain quantity of staples and this much ramp and these kinds of removal spells. And honestly, I don't believe in any of that. So I set out to build a deck that plays really differently from that default template. Don't feel like you have to do certain things. Commander is still a wonderful open game and can be enjoyed in a wide variety of different ways. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I put quite a lot of work into building this deck, so I hope you guys like it. I don't know, it was hard to follow up the reception to the Rocco and Norin video, but I don't know, I just think the idea is really neat. I think it's cool. I hope you guys think it's cool too. Anyways, before I go though, I set up a PO box a little while ago. So if you want to, you can send me stuff. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying if you want to. The address is down below. But I have received a few things. So Dr. Teaspoon sent me this, which came with a warning that it's nuclear. Or X-ray radiation, apologies, not nuclear, that would be ridiculous. And it included a forest. And this forest is special because it's a glow-in-the-dark forest, which unfortunately, I don't know how to record that. So you're just gonna have to trust me on it, but it's cool, I really like it. So we've got a glow-in-the-dark forest from Dr. Teaspoon. And then I got this right here, which I got from Havrit. Now I haven't opened it yet because it's weird and I thought you guys might enjoy opening it alongside with me. So this is gonna be the next 3 minutes or however long it takes. But this is a Dragon Shield box and you can see that Dragon Shield boxes on the back, they usually have like a little bit of this flavor text. But a lot of it has been crossed out and now it says DM me to solve the puzzle. So there's a whole bunch of going on with this. And then at the top it says to Baumi, name, yep, this is definitely legal. I have not opened this yet, so let's have a look together. Oh, I see. It's... Oh, it's a deck full of crossed out cards. Friend, flash, you may cast spells. Whenever you choose friend, draw a card. How wonderful. Island, it says E. I'm not sure why it says E. I guess that's a thing. This is crack, destroy target treasure token. That's very specific. Sacrifice this spell. When wind enters the battlefield, cry too. I'm not entirely sure how to do that. This is fantastic. I really enjoy it. Oh, there's the lands say something on them. Oh yeah, all of them have something written. All of the islands, all of the lands, they have like a letter on them. And it's kind of arranged in a way. I guess this is the puzzle. Oh, there's an R up there. What am I gonna do with that? This is too complicated for me. I can't deal with this. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, I really like this forest though. Oh, this is a nice one. I'm taking this one out of this deck. I'm taking this one out of this deck and I'm putting this into something else. I'm sorry. This is fantastic. I really love it. Okay. Let me see if I can figure this out really quick. Alright, I spent the last 20 minutes trying to figure this shit out and then I gave up and I messaged Havrin and he only replied and I quote, "It's a sentence." And then I asked, "What's the sentence? I gotta know." And then he just writes back, "Lol, as if I remember." Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'll see you guys next week.